All right, Mette Johansson, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation on the stories that hold women back at work.
Thank you so much for having me, Bhavna.
Wonderful. So I have been reading your book right here, Narratives, newly launched. And as I was sharing with you even before we started this conversation, I've been reading this book and all along nodding my head, which I don't know if it's good or bad, but the truth of the matter is so many of the myths that you've shared in this book and the myths that you're trying to bust are so prevalent still, and they definitely cut across cultures. In my work of doing this now for the last 8 years, I definitely feel like you have absolutely captured the most damaging myths that do indeed hold women back. So, before we dive into those actual myths, I'd love your perspective on what prompted you to write a book like this.
It was in a discussion with a client where we realized that there's so many things that we're saying that we as women are just rolling our eyes about, where it has absolutely no foundation in the truth. It is stories that we keep on telling without taking a step back and reflecting, what is the real story here? What is the rational perspective? It is interesting how human beings very often retell stories that have no roots in the truth. Now, it was in a discussion with a client, and we thought we got to put it down in the book and make it a bit entertaining and fun. Also, there's a lot of serious stories, serious books, serious things going on with gender equality debate. Now, of course, it is a serious matter. And at the same time, I want to point out in an entertaining and fun manner that it's quite ridiculous how we don't stop and question these stories.
So true, so true. So, in this book, you have outlined 10 of these myths. Let's take up a few of them. The first one, which is almost ludicrous that it persists. Nonetheless, let's start with the first one, which is women are too emotional. What have you uncovered about that?
Women are too emotional. It is all I need to say to get women going of, oh, yes, you need to write this book. Oh, this book is so much needed. And of course, putting in some emotions there. Now, it's not about being emotional or not. It is about women being told that they're too emotional, and it can harm their career progress, that they're not leadership material because they're too hysterical, because they're too emotional in terms of might be shedding a tear. We're not we're not stopping to take a step back, think about what we're saying. One chief human resource officer whom I interviewed, she was in sorry, can we stop it there as well?
You can continue. I'll edit
We
it
can
out.
continue and you will edit it. I don't remember whether she was in India or in Pakistan, so I'll skip that in so and so. I just forgot where she's based. Okay. One chief human resource officer whom I interviewed, she said, "Phew, women too emotional. You should see the boys in the boardroom. When they don't get their ways, they will slam their fists on the table, they will shout, they will jump up." It is a good demonstration of we're all emotional. It is about what emotions are accepted at the workplace. And what's interesting is that the emotions that negatively impact us, they are acceptable. They are accepted at the workplace. If you're angry, which is a behavior that is more often demonstrated by men than by women, if you're angry at the workplace, it's accepted. If you are enthusiastic, if you're frustrated because a project didn't go your way and maybe you're shedding a tear, that is not accepted. When did that happen? When did it happen that the emotions that are negatively impacting others, they're accepted. The emotions that are neutral or maybe even positive enthusiasm that can rub off and that can be a positive effect on others. When did that become unacceptable at the workplace?
So true. I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said it's not about which gender is more emotional, because they're both equally emotional. The one work that I often cite, I'm not sure if you came across her work as well, is of Lisa Feldman Barrett, who really is the world's foremost authority on emotions. And her research clearly shows, on average, men and women experience all emotions equally. So the science behind this is absolutely clear. Women are not more emotional, but I think to your point, Mette, you're so right. The question really is, which emotions are considered to be socially acceptable? And there are certain emotions that men can show, as you said, anger, which women cannot. And there's other emotions which women can show, like sadness or, crying at the workplace. We accept it, but then we also perceive women as being weak when they show those emotions. And the other thing which I really like, which you do highlight, is that our emotions can be a source of strength. And indeed, for women, the entire range of emotions that we experience can be our passion, our excitement, our all, all the emotions can be such a beautiful source of strength. And so let's embrace that as well.
Absolutely. Embrace the emotions that have a positive impact. And let's manage the emotions that have a negative impact, especially on others. Because if you are a leader, you should be taking care of your people. You should not have a negative impact on others.
So true. So true. Here's another myth, which again comes up so often, to the point where this one, it's not just a myth that you hear from other genders, men and others. Equally, I see a lot of women agreeing to this as well, which I sometimes find concerning, which is that women don't help other women. This whole queen bee syndrome. So I'd love for you to shed some light on that as well. What do you see with that myth?
There's lots of research that shows that women, if they are in an environment where there's only space for one token woman to meet the diversity quotas, to make sure that we show that, hey, we have women in leadership, then of course it becomes a competition. Am I going to be that woman? Are you going to be that woman? And that could also be having very negative effects. Or if you're put in an environment where it is very competitive, where it is elbows out or you won't make it, then some women are showing up with behavior that might not necessarily be their preferred authentic behavior. But they know that that is what's needed in order to succeed. So there's lots of reasons why, yes, we can find plenty of women who are not supporting other women. Now, I do not think that that is something that's innately in us. In fact, all the different women's groups that I'm involved in, super supportive of each other when you're creating the right environment. And often it is, if you create a single gender environment of women only, it is amazing the magic that happens. And it's interesting because a lot of companies right now say, oh, but we're so inclusive. We don't want to have women in leadership programs only or women's group only. I have seen the magic that's being created when you put women in a single gender group. For instance, with KeyNote Women Speakers, a nonprofit directory that I'm leading and that you're also a speaker on, we have women only. The volunteers are women only. When you get a group of women in a room, only one gender, only women, super supportive, amazingly supportive. in terms of let's support each other to become those confident, inspiring expert speakers on a topic. I also
So
see it in lots of other environments. For instance, we have a women's networking group. When you have a women's networking group only, it's something very simple as you ask them to introduce themselves. It's much more likely we have women only in the room that their titles are left outside. It is not of I'm the director of so and so, I'm the chief, what have you. It is more about I'm this person, this is what I stand for, this is what's important to me, this is me. It is a complete change of tone when you have women in the room only. And we need to support that. We need to make sure that women will be able to find their strength in such an environment. And when they found their strength, when they are allowed to be themselves, then they can go out there and be in a mixed gender environment and simply allowed to be themselves, not being that queen bee or whatever funny names we have designed for women to show that they're not good enough. They are too nasty. No, it's not true. Women can work wonderfully together.
so true, so true. And with this myth as well, what I'm seeing is it's really a matter of reframing that question and or asking a different question. And in this case, the question we want to ask is, what are the dynamics of the environment that are leading men or any gender to act in a more, let's say, competitive way or a less collaborative way than would be ideal? Because you're right, in other kinds of setups, such as even at Shenomics, the organization that I run, we see this all the time. Whenever we put out, let's say, a call for mentors, and in this case, specifically, let's say women mentors, so women helping other women, our inbox gets flooded, just absolutely flooded from all kinds of women who want to pay it forward. And you're right. The ego is not getting in the way. There's no sense of competitiveness or anything negative getting in the way. They simply want to pay it forward. So absolutely, I think questioning why in certain organizations the culture is creating such a dynamic is an important question to ask, because as you said, it's not something innate in us that we don't want to help each other. And the other thing I also see, Meta, and I'm curious if you see this as well, is speaking of the organizational culture, when I look at a lot of senior women, most of them, as I said, definitely want to pay it forward. A few, though, have shared that one impediment that does get in the way of helping other women more is, well, if you're a senior woman, and let's say there are only a handful of spots for senior roles, you're already working twice as hard proving yourself. And then on top of that, if you have to take out time to mentor others, especially let's say other women, and if that is viewed by the organization as non-promotable work, then you're spending a lot of your time, effort, and energy engaging in something that is not going to be very rewarding for you at the end of the day. So I'm curious to see if you've also seen this dynamic at work, which also gets in the way.
Absolutely. And the fact is that most women are still the ones who are project managing the entire household back home, whether it is the task in terms of cooking, cleaning, even if you have a helper, as many people do in Singapore, in India, some of the regions that we are both covering. Now, we are project managing the household and we're taking care of the children, maybe also the elderly. That is a lot of extra brain capacity that is going into that direction. So if we are already project managing the household, we have to work harder to get to where we are at. We're then also asked to mentor and a lot of women are asked to mentor because they're looking for women to mentor the upcoming women, to be role models and to share how did they become successful. So there's a lot of extra pressure on women. Now, the point is also that when you're saying women work harder, sometimes it is because women are not so good at promoting themselves. Women might not be so good at building their own image and also at being seen at work, which are essential elements for you to get promoted, to be seen as leadership material. You need to promote yourself. You need to make sure, what is my personal branding and how can I make sure that people know what I stand for, who I am. So working a little bit less on that performance piece and a little bit more on that image piece, that is essential. And that is something that a lot of women don't naturally get as much as men do. But there's lots of other factors also playing into this, why women have so much extra work to do and what we need to change. And I'm not blaming it all on the men, of course, or on society. It is simply that it is a fact that women are not as good at promoting themselves. So how do we change this? Yes, we need to make sure that the interviewers don't only recruit women on past performance, but also on potential, which is very interesting because in our biases, we automatically have more focus on women's past experience when we're interviewing and on men's potential. So of course, the interviewers, society, systems need to be changed to allow women to also succeed. And at the same time, we need to give women the confidence to speak up in meetings, to say, here am I, to speak up on stages, share their opinion, their conviction, their passion, their expertise. That is where we need to get at.
No, absolutely. Being able to promote ourselves and make ourselves more visible is so, so essential. So to your point, absolutely. It's also so much about where are we spending that time and energy and effort and to ensure that it really gets us the result that would help us in our careers. The other myth that does come up and is again so persistent is around mothers and questioning whether mothers are as committed or as dedicated to their work as their counterparts. What do you see with this myth? What keeps coming up still?
There's a couple of things that play into this. As always, it's always a more complex matter than just this is the one solution. Are women less ambitious? Are mothers less ambitious? There is a research from Harvard Business School, and that is, of course, a bunch of very aspirational people with high ambitions. When they are studying who is more ambitious, men, women, all genders are equally ambitious. The difference is in one point, and that is men are expecting to be in the lead for their careers, whereas women are expecting to have dual career paths. So what is happening when the kids are coming? The man is expecting that that is not going to stop him in his career. The woman is expecting that they will take half the share each. And when that's not happening, because there's a discrepancy between those two mindsets and attitudes, then of course, often it's the woman who decides to step back because somebody has to do it. And that's often when the woman decides to work for a company who will accommodate longer maternity breaks and less hours during a week, during a day. So that is one of the things that is playing in. That is not about less ambitious. It's simply about what is happening in reality when the kids are coming. Women, they will then project manage everything in the house, and then they have less bandwidth to do what's needed at the workplace. That is one of the things that is playing in. Another thing that I experience time upon time again, we do a lot of women in leadership trainings, and during that training, we have one module, which is your big audacious goal. What would you be if you had that magic wand? You could be whatever you wanted in the world. What would that be? Whether it is a position or impact you can make, dream big. Every single time I get at least one woman who says, I'm not really that ambitious, or I'm quite happy at where I'm at right now. The interesting thing is, of course, that these are women who are being paid leadership development programs that are not necessarily cheap by their employer, meaning that their employer sees some potential in them and they say, I'm not really ambitious, I'm happy where I'm at. The first time I observed this in a training course, I asked the room, or that specific woman, I asked her, what would you do if you were a man? What would your big audacious goal be if you were a man? She picked up her pen and she started writing her big audacious goal. I'm repeating this in every single workshop that I do with women on your big audacious goal. And every single time it repeats itself. A woman picks up her pen and all of a sudden has the imagination to be the CEO, to be Secretary General from the United Nations, or to be an entrepreneur who is super successful every single time. What does that tell us? That is not that women are not ambitious, but that what comes with it is too much of a price to pay for women. They see that they will have to work even longer hours, be away even more from the children, be more stressed, be involved in the politics is also one of the mindset we're uncovering when we have such a situation that, oh, all that politics, all that, oof, I don't want to be part of it. So it's not about women being less ambitious. It is about the things that come with having an ambition and being a woman. That is sometimes too much of an exhausting thought that we'd rather not give it any chance to flourish.
Yes. Yes. So again, the question here is what's really at work? What's really happening? Because that is eroding the ambition of women. Because, like you said, multiple studies have been done, including the one you just cited, that women are actually coming into the workforce with greater sense of ambition than men. But just a few years later, another study that I often cite was done by Bain, where they asked the same group, when they came into the workforce, men and women equally ambitious, they surveyed the same group just 2 or 3 years later, and they saw that the men were still holding on to the same level of ambition that they entered the workforce with. But for the women experienced a 60% decline in their level of ambition. So yes, the question we have to ask is what's happening on the home front that is causing women to believe they are not going to have the same level of support should they move forward with the same level of ambition. And equally, what's happening in the organization that is giving women the sense that I don't know if my ambition can be supported in this organization, or if I can be that ambitious, can I really manage that level of ambition given the kind of support or the lack thereof I might have around me. So again, I think Mette, you're right. It's we have to ask a different set of questions if we're going to break a lot of these myths.
A Swedish minister once said that equality at the workplace starts in the home. And that was during the debate of making sure that women and men, that all genders get equal parenting leave rights. I've interviewed a Swedish father who also said that it makes such a big impact for equality in the home when you have paternity leave as well, so that you have parental leave for all genders. He was, as all fathers in Scandinavia, not all, very wide majority of fathers in Scandinavia, he had paternity leave. And that meant that he was home alone with the kids when they were small, whilst the mother was going to work. That resulted in him bonding with the kid on a very different level. And that means when you have a special bond with the kids that is being nurtured when the kids are very small, he kept that up along the way, and he would take a lot more responsibility in that child caring responsibility of the home. So you're creating a very different environment if you start early. And that's what we need to do. A lot of women that I spoke to as well, they will say things such as, well, I have delegated the responsibility to my husband to make sure that the sports bag and the school bag is packed in the morning. But what happens when it's not? Who does it? It's still me. He will happily go to work and the kids don't have a sports bag. They're ending up at school with only half of the things they need. And their answer is, so what? Then they'll figure it out. And the women have a much stronger sense of responsibility, for good or bad. For good or bad, they have a much stronger sense of responsibility to say, no, I want to make sure that my children have that sports bag or whatever material it is that they need for school, that they have that on a daily basis. Women take more responsibility, although they're saying they're delegating, they're still picking up whatever goes wrong. So no, they're still project managing the entire private family business, right? The family Inc. That's still on the shoulders of women. And that means that you still have to think about it. You think you have delegated it, but no, these women are saying, I cannot completely delegate it because then my kid goes to school without the things that he need every other day.
So true. And that feeds another myth, which incidentally, you haven't mentioned in the book, but it does come up that women are better at multitasking. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, whether they are better at it or not is debatable. But as you just said, because they have to multitask, they have to take care of so many things, they have to project manage so many things, and that creates such a significant additional mental load, which of course gets in the way or makes a lot of women question what that additional responsibility in the workplace is going to mean for them as they're moving on in their careers. Speaking of which, when we're looking at leadership positions, the other concern we hear a lot from decision makers within organizations is, well, there simply aren't enough women to fill the leadership positions, and it's an issue of the pipeline being as slim as it is. How do you counter that assertion?
I have worked in an industry where there was not a very big pipeline of women. It is more difficult in certain industries to get women because not enough women are studying the subject, STEM, for instance. At the same time, I am so sick and tired of that debate. When I was in a panel discussion some years ago, I was invited on the panel, and there was the supply chain leader who sat on the panel as well and said exactly that. Well, we just don't have that pipeline of women. I've heard the discussion for 30 years. And yes, I started working 30 years ago. And that's when people talked about there's no pipeline of women. Why didn't you do anything 30 years ago? And especially for supply chain, there's so many bordering functions where women would be present and they would have those transferable skills to be successful in supply chain. For instance, anything that has to deal with customers or marketing. Isn't that something where you can train people to also be leaders in supply chain? Absolutely. Of course, that industry knowledge and functional knowledge might be needed. In fact, it's much more difficult to get to know or to become a great leader if you don't have that in it. then to deal with a new function, yes, you need some industry knowledge. You can get introduced to a couple of key people that you need in the network in a month's time. Can you learn to be an awesome leader in 1 month's time? No, you cannot. We need to look much broader in terms of what are the skills that we need for this position. And there's so much around leadership that I can go on with for forever here. Leadership is a skill. You don't need to know all the individual jobs of the people in your team. You need to be leading these people. You need to make sure to say, I have an expert on that. I will ask my expert and I will get back to you with a recommendation if you're posed a question that you don't need know the answer to on the spot. We're looking so much into, oh, you need to have all these experiences in order to have that position. There's something called transferable skills. And we're looking way too little of that. So there's a lot of things that can get me really emotional about this line of argumentation of we don't have enough women in the pipeline. Well, you're also destroying the pipeline, for instance. A lot of women are not treated well when they are pregnant, they have small children, and you're not giving enough options for them to balance that extra responsibility that comes with when you have a big bump here and you need to give life to another person. Yeah, we do need to make sure that we create an environment where that is possible. So yes, not enough pipeline, not enough women in the pipeline. There's a lot of different things here that we can really easily pull apart and completely dismiss it. It is true that fewer women have traditionally studied STEM. And also, when you speak about women in STEM, they're saying, I'm here, I'm not fast enough. It's very often also about what networks are you looking at when you're looking for somebody to fill a position in engineering or whatever those more male-dominated jobs are. Are you only looking in your own network, or are you also looking a bit broader? What is the wording that you use for a job ad? Is it, we want to get a go-getter who doesn't mind to knock out the competition? That wording, women put off by that. So how is it that you're looking for women to fill that position? We're not looking at the right places. We're not doing enough. If we're not correcting it, yes, of course, it will not change.
Absolutely. And another really important point, Mette, you made in the book is, are we also looking for the right set of quality or value to fill the leadership roles? In terms of when you ask a lot of decision makers, what are the strengths or unique skills that women bring to the table, a lot of people will agree that, yeah, women are more collaborative, they're more compassionate, they're more patient, they're more humble. But when you ask them, are these the kind of qualities and values that you are looking for in the person who's going to fill this leadership role? Are you actually calling it out? The truth is, no, not many people are actually calling it out. So if we're not making these roles inclusive and welcoming of the women who could fill these positions, of course, you're going to get more and more male leaders or other genders to fill those roles, because we're not spelling out that women are suited for these roles.
Absolutely. I like to share that the business world has been created by men for men. And that is very much a fact. It sounds very harsh to some people. Now, look at the books that are used to taught at business schools. I did an MBA many years ago, and I looked at the books that I used to study when I did my MBA. They're all written by the white, American, able-bodied, straight, or at least acting straight man. A very small demography of what, 100 million people in this world, and the rest of us are supposed to fit into how they are defining what is the gold standard of doing business. So, of course, a lot of women don't really fit in the same way. We might be leading in ways that traditionally have not been seen as leadership. When we look at values, in the past, we talked about more female traits, more female values, and more masculine values or traits. If we reframe that to be much more traits, collaborative traits versus competitive traits, that gives a different perspective. That allows us all to own these traits, whatever gender we have. We can own these traits. A man can say, hey, compassion is important to me. And a woman can say, performance, being analytical, strategic, that's important to me. So we have to redefine what is leadership.
Yeah.
And a story that I also share in my book was an interview I had with a senior leader, a female leader working in a quite masculine environment, again, a male dominated environment, IT consulting. And she was in the most senior position in her region. And she immediately says, oh, no, we've had diversity and inclusion consultants look at our hiring processes, our promotional processes, all processes from hiring to firing. We're okay. We're gender neutral. Now, at some point of time during our lunch conversation, she said, yeah, women are a lot more reflective. We're bringing a different perspective in. We might not be as impulsive as men in taking decisions. My reaction to that was, have you taken that into account for your hiring criteria? She said, you got me there. You got me there. So even when you have the biggest consultants look at your processes, there might still be things that are overlooked. Another person I interviewed, she had a very similar story where she talked about patience, that women might have a bit more patience than a lot of the male leaders in her environment. So yes, let's look at the values that are truly advancing good leadership. What is the culture that we want to create? The leadership principles, the people culture that we have. What is it that we want to have as a culture? And are we promoting the leadership traits that are necessary in order to create just this? Or are we getting stuck with, this is what we believe it is because this is how a bunch of white American dudes have defined as the gold standard of doing business?
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, Meta, you cover in the book, which I'm so glad you do, is you also talk about essential skills that will equip people with the tools and the strategies to be able to talk about some of these myths or bust them in the most effective manner. Can you share what what would be a few skills that any one of us can be mindful of or can try and intentionally cultivate to start changing some of these narratives?
I provide both arguments to shatter the myth, and I also provide skills. One of the skills is calling people in to a conversation rather than calling out. Let's have conversations around it. And asking open-ended, neutral, non-judgmental questions is one of the good ways to start a conversation. If we start doing all the attacking, man-bashing, saying you're a misogynist, we're not going to get into a conversation that's going to be very constructive. What we get is defensiveness. And yes, some people are also much better at calling it out in a very harsh manner. You need to have the personality for that. Not everybody has the personality for that. And the ones who have the personality for it, they probably don't need to read my book. It's more for the people who find it difficult to call out when some of these myths are being reinforced and retold. Very often asking open-ended questions. A very easy one that applies in a lot of situations is, would you say the same if we were talking about a man? Or what makes you think that? Open-ended questions are a very good way to start a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Having these tools just gives you this additional confidence that okay, I can contest this and I can do it in a way that doesn't make the other person feel attacked. Because if we're going to cultivate allies, and we do need allies, this is if we're really going to make a dent in the space of women's leadership, it's not going to happen if it's just all of us women advocating a lot of these ideas. We do need allies. We do need male allies in particular. What have you in your work, because I know you also do a lot of work around building male allies. What have you seen is a effective strategy?
Cultivating allies is about having the conversations, of course. It is about having those constructive conversations about what is it that I perceive, and hopefully for that ally to be open and to listen. Now, it is very difficult. We do male allyship courses, as you were alluding to, and it's challenging to get men to sign up because either you have the men who are saying, oh, I'm already an ally. I don't really need this. This is for those who are misogynists, who are not supportive of women, and that's me. Or you have the ones who are not seeing that there's an issue, and they don't see that they should be spending their time, their valuable time, on studying something that doesn't really promote their own success in business as how they perceive it. Will it promote their success? Absolutely. There's so many companies who will only promote you into leadership positions if you are also an inclusive leader. But yes, this is a challenge. It is really a challenge. The best way of promoting more allyship is to have those open conversations, to make sure we're calling people more into conversation instead of calling people out. That is the one tip that I can give everybody. And at International Women's Day, keep on shouting about, hey, it's not just about women getting together and whining together about how the world is so mean to us. No, it is about having conversations together. What can be done? What is the best way? The best way is for all of us to nudge men around us as well, to make men aware that we need also allies. We need you to support us. One example of why it is important for men is that if you are in a situation where you are having an argument, for instance, I was having an argument with one person who said, oh, you angry women, or no, in fact, he said, German women are always so angry, and they should learn a little bit from Thai women. I think he thought I was German, and that's why he was talking about German women. I was definitely hearing you angry women, and I started being really angry. I must say, it triggered me. I got angry when I was told, or at least that was what I was, how I was perceiving the situation, that I was told to be a little bit more like Thai women, to be much softer and, kneel for men and serve them food because Thai women love doing that. I went, oh my goodness. Now, in a situation like that, if another woman steps in and supports me, it's one thing. If a man steps in and supports
Yeah.
me in terms of saying, why do you believe that Thai women would be kneeling for men? And do you think that is really appropriate? What might be behind it? If there would have been a man who would have called this out, we would have a complete different quality of conversation. We need men also who have enough understanding of what are some of these myths, what are the narratives, what are we saying that actually keeps women on a lesser footing than men? And kneeling for men is one of the things that keep us on a lesser footing, almost quite literally, right? If we have more men calling this out, supporting us, we will be able to advance the conversation so much faster and
Mm.
get equality and equity so much faster.
Yes, yes. It's like you said, it's not just about converting the misogynists, if you will. It could just be about the ones that already believe in the cause, that believe in equality and fairness and equity in the workplace, to just speak out more, as you said, when incidences like the one you just shared happen, to call it out, and equally when women are not in the room and conversations like these are being held, to also dispel and call out or call in these kinds of biases. So we just, it's really just about the good people who are aware, really working with that awareness a lot more. So thank you for sharing that. I'll make this the final question, Meta. I know you also talk a lot about authentic leadership, and it aligns really beautifully with what we talk about at Shenomics, about conscious leadership. And the common element that I see that's really powerful is this, having this core essence around value, and being very aware of what are those values that are important to you, that you want to live and lead with, which you define as authentic leadership. So my question to you, Meta, would be, what does it mean for you to live and lead consciously? What are those values that allow you to live and lead consciously and authentically?
We're probably talking very close concepts here. We're probably talking about the same thing here. Because what makes us authentic? There's a lot of misperception around what makes us authentic. I very often get the question of, well, but what if you're really angry? Is authentic to show your anger? No, it is not. There's such a thing called emotional intelligence, and you can learn to be more emotional intelligent. It has nothing to do with authenticity. When you look at what makes people perceive you as being authentic, that is when you live a set of core values, your personal core values, and you do that very consistently. And that is having that conscience about what is it you are really standing for at the core. There are even INSEAD professors. There's even an INSEAD professor who says, oh, there's limit of authenticities, because if you're in a different culture, you cannot be your same as you are in your own culture. That's again a very superficial way of looking at it. If we live our core values, doesn't just, whether we're giving a business card with two hands, as people do in East Asia, that is not making me inauthentic to give my business card with two hands. That is simply having a little bit of different behavior on that iceberg, top of the iceberg, right? Whereas the core of us, the deeper parts of us, that is where, what values, what beliefs do we have? What are the concepts and principles that are truly important to you that you do not want to compromise on? When you live that, that makes you being perceived as authentic by other people. And it also makes you feel more authentic. So if you consider in the evening, how did I live my values today? How can I live it even better tomorrow? You have that self-awareness about what is truly at the core of you. What is it that makes you authentic? And it's not this misperception of, oh, bringing your whole self to work. Well, I don't want to bring my whole self to work. I want to bring my relevant self to work. Of course, I shouldn't be forced to hide what is important to me at the workplace. That's a different thing. But then again, if you look at, for instance, bringing your whole self to work, I'm a working professional. I run a business. I'm a speaker, trainer, coach, consultant. I'm also a mother of two. And I don't need to say that I'm a mother of two. In fact, it doesn't give me any brownie points. If I were a man, yes, it would give me brownie points. But is that really a relevant part of me at work? I'm not hiding for anybody at work that I am also a mother. But it's not relevant as my first introduction, so I'm not sharing it as my first introduction. I haven't shared it here on this course at all, I haven't shared it on this podcast at all because it's not relevant right now. And let me share another thing. I like my glass of Chablis or Chardonnay. That's also a very authentic part of me, right? But is it relevant at work? I'm not going to introduce myself as I'm a mother of two. I like my glass of Chardonnay and I run MetaMind training. I'm a consultant. I'm a coach. No, it's not a relevant part of me. So all that talk about bring your whole self to work, it should rather be you have the permission to bring the relevant parts of yourself to work. And you don't need to hide who you are. I do not need to hide that I like a glass of wine, but it's definitely not the first or second or third or 10th thing that I'm going to share about myself. Only right now, because we're talking about authenticity, is it that I'm sharing it? Otherwise, I wouldn't mention it on the podcast, would I?
Yeah. Yeah. Lovely. Lovely. Thank you so much, Meta, for this conversation. And thank you for writing this book. Because I think what books like this do is, yes, they help to dispel a lot of these myths that are so damaging for women. What I also think that a book like this does is it relieves the entire burden of advancing women in the workplace from just women. Because what also I see happening sometimes is the focus tends to be, okay, if we're going to get more women in leadership, or if we're going to get women to advance in the workplace, let's just put all our focus on training women or fixing quote unquote women. Whereas the truth is, if we're really going to support women in advancing, we have to change these narratives everywhere in our organizations, at home. We have to change the ecosystem, the environment in which women work and live. So it's not just the women. It will require a collective effort. And I think your book goes a long way in helping us do that. So thank you so much for arming us with these tools and strategies for doing that.
Thank you. Yes, the book has been written to give women more arguments when they are confronted with the myths. Of course, having the awareness of what is going on there, stopping for a moment to think what's going on, stepping back, reflecting on it, and equipping them with the skills and arguments to say something that lands a lot better, having that response ready when you are confronted with these myths. And I hope also that other genders will pick up the book and support women, be those allies, and speak up when you see that's going on, because it's so much more powerful when it's coming from somebody who's not emotionally involved, who's not the one who is being affected by this myth.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meta.